Hey there, it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday. We all know what that means. Another riveting episode of Behind Breaking Bond. Somebody had a big day today.
Yeah, you. So we just actually left City Hall, and Mayor John Whitmire proclaimed today as Randy Wallace Day.
Can you believe that?
Actually, congratulations.
I'm Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services. So when they approached me about this, they said, we're at the W's in names. Do you have anybody with a W?
They're like desperate. We need a W for proclamation. Seriously, this guy, Isaiah Carey, Tory Walker, they had a big part to play in it, and I was truly honored by it. And John Whitmire and I, we go way back. It's like you and I go way back. It really was nice to get the proclamation from him. Joining us today is someone who doesn't need to be introduced, but introduce yourself anyway.
Kim Ogg, Harris County District Attorney, longtime friend and runaway supporter of Randy Wallace at Fox News from early on.
For folks who haven't been around a long time, give people an idea of what you did before you became the DA.
Well, before I was the DA, I've been a lawyer 36 years. I started out as a line prosecutor. Met Andy when he was over at the parole board.
Yeah.
As an officer, not the parole board, but he was a
when he was
officer.
On parole.
Yeah, when he was on parole,
Yeah.
That's more like it. We were in the middle of a crime crisis, and I ended up serving 7 years there, serving victims and trying homicides and capital murders and rapes and all kinds of horrible, serious stuff that ended up shaping the direction of my life. I ran Crime Stoppers after that, and I ran the mayor's anti-gang office. Andy and I actually did that in the 90s together.
You kind of started that.
I did start that.
I mean, you kind of started the whole anti-gang.
I did.
Force.
I was asked by the same mayor as Andy. Andy ran the first crime victims assistance office in the City Hall, mayor's office, and I ran the first anti-gang crime task force. And we worked with police, the legislature, and we really kept Houston from going the way that a lot of major urban areas did, where they just sort of devolved into total gang violence.
That's an excellent point, because it never really got that bad here.
No, it was bad. We had drive-by shootings. We
Yeah.
still have drive-by shootings, but nothing like we saw in LA or Chicago.
Yeah.
And they were right in front of us. There was only one reason that we didn't, and I think that was our attention, our local government led by the mayor and law enforcement and me and others to keep this city from going the way that gangs
The
took.
Erdman Pena case was like a catalyst.
That
It was.
yes.
It was. So the Erdman Pena case was a brutal gang kidnapping and rape of 2 young women as part of a gang initiation. Happened right over off TC Chester. And the memorial is still there. I worked on that case, wrote the warrants, and that case resulted in 4 death capitals and 1 life sentence for a juvenile. Now I think commuted to 40. But
What made you decide to run for DA?
because I wanted a victim-centric system, and in 30-some years we hadn't had one. I felt like the DA's office could really make people safer by focusing on what victims want, which is just basic safety. And I don't think people can live with injustice. I wanted to lead the trial lawyers in this city against the violent criminals. Kind of classic, I wanted to serve my fellow citizens and make them safer. And I have a special skill set that I thought was,
Liam
relevant.
Neeson said that in a movie.
Who said that?
Liam Neeson
Said
said
what?
that I have a special skill set and I'm going to use it. It was by
He's probably a villain in that
Right,
movie, but
right.
I'm telling you, I've used it for good.
And you faced 2 big things that no DA in history really here had to face. You had to face the hurricane, the destruction from Hurricane Harvey, and then turn around and we're in a pandemic. I mean, those are life-changing moments that you.
The obstacles that we faced in local government in Houston in the last 8 years are pretty amazing that we've come through. It's only because we're Houstonians and we always come through, and we do it because we're innovative and we're hardworking and we just never give up. So I led our institution, 850 employees, through Harvey, which knocked out the courthouse for more than 4 years. The commissioner's court did not repair the courthouse sufficiently for us to be housed in there full time, and it
You
was
all
a
moved
mess.
around for a while
We
too,
did.
didn't you?
We did. Our solution was going paperless
Yeah.
because our lawyers were like nomads, sent from one government outpost to another while they moved like molasses on the courthouse. And that's part of why you have a backlog. And then it was followed by a worldwide pandemic. None of us had seen that.
Right.
It totally shut down our system. Andy, you think that crime increased because of the pandemic, or do you think it was because of the conditions caused by the pandemic?
I will tell you that COVID-19 became a convenient excuse, and I'll cite why. Your office, we had a press conference at Crime Stoppers with the Harris County District Attorney's Office, you, and HPD in October of 2019. And that's where we started bringing out to the public what we started seeing, the revolving door at the courthouse involving numerous defendants who were being released on multiple felony bonds, who were getting PR bonds. So we started looking at that, bringing it to everybody's attention well before you ever heard the term COVID.
Right.
This happened October 2019. It's documented. Anybody can watch the
Yeah.
press conference that we did. So I think COVID became a convenient excuse for everything that went on.
Well, it was a real hardship on law enforcement and everybody who was an essential employee in government. You know, we saw a lot of the offices in county government go home and work from home. Our lawyers didn't have that opportunity.
Right.
A few did, but to keep intake running and keep public safety in check and support 86 law enforcement agencies, we had to be OTJ all the time, 24/7.
The one thing I kind of think about with COVID is I think people that were maybe kind of on the edge, like mentally or whatever, it may have pushed them over.
Well, domestic violence. it would be
Yeah,
a crime.
people-
Yeah, we saw a huge
Yeah,
spike. It's just a function of people living together
Being
in close
together all the
corners,
time,
right?
right, yeah.
Close quarters. But don't you think that the isolation that it caused seemed to increase the level of violence?
Yes,
You
That
can
was
tell
weird.
by the murder rate.
Yeah.
Clearly.
right.
But not just the murder
Murder,
rate,
the rough-
the intensity of the murders.
Yeah.
When people could shoot someone twice, instead they'd shoot someone 22 times. It was horrific. I didn't understand that reaction to a worldwide pandemic. You know, most people get more empathetic toward other
Right,
people.
yeah.
But it seemed like violent criminals got less empathetic, and they really had that anger and kill mentality that creates what I call ultra violence.
And you know, it wasn't that long ago, but to me, it almost seems like it was like a lifetime ago or something, you know, it was.
Well, we're still coming out of that huge caseload crush that it put us in of about 148,000 cases. We have that down on December 31st. We had it down to 105,000 cases. We know we're going to file another 100,000 this year. And by the way, folks, there's a lot more crimes than 100,000. That's simply the number that gets solved with sufficient evidence for our lawyers to take the cases into court. So when you start with 105,000 and you know you're going to get another 100,000, if we're going to keep decreasing that caseload so we can get back to pre-Harvey levels, our people literally have to work at greater than 100% every single day. That's why I'm really proud of them.
You have a very difficult job. Your job is probably one of the most difficult elected jobs in the county. What is it about doing it that keeps you wanting to do it?
Well, we're able to help people through effective policies. Example, our city did not become Portland, San Francisco, Detroit. We have not had looters come through and shoplift freely because I didn't implement those types of policies that would waive prosecution. I think that leaves law enforcement with questions they can't answer to the public. Why are you letting somebody go? And I think that has harmed cities and their ability to bring in businesses. And so one of my passions is our city and county. I love it. We're international, we're world class, but we can't be considered one of the most violent and retain that great reputation. So I want people to live here because they don't just feel safe. I want them to be safe. And I felt like as DA, I could do that.
You grew up here.
Yeah.
Your dad, you went to school here, and obviously, you know, you have a personal story with your mother that gives you a little bit more understanding of what crime victims go through.
I think if my mom had not been kidnapped when she was a young, beautiful woman by a serial rapist and had to save her own life by jumping out of the car that he was kidnapping her in, I really think my family's entire trajectory would have been different. You know, my dad, who became a lawyer and a state senator, they were talking Peace Corps, you know, peace and love, and traveled the world.
Yeah.
And instead, they ended up going hardcore into public service. And I think it was because of my mother's kidnapping and the crime committed by the rapist who kidnapped her against two other women. I think it really shaped them at a very young age. And then by being raised by a crime victim, you know, you don't think about that, but it, of course, is part of the reason I became the district attorney.
What's your favorite thing about being the DA, would you say?
Being on this show.
Right.
Well, you know, my favorite thing is when people tell us that our prosecutors or one of our employees made a real difference in their life, a better difference. And one thing victims have been telling me, 36 years, Andy and I have been working with crime victims, me as a line prosecutor and then running Crime Stoppers, the anti-gang task force girl. We've seen lots of victims, but this is something I'm just hearing over and over now. When they finally get their cases resolved, and it's taking way too long, like 4 or 5 years for people to get their justice, then they tell me they can grieve. And I think that is something that nobody should underestimate the importance of. When you can't grieve the loss of a loved one, somebody who is just snatched from you by violence, imagine how unjust, how that must just be an insult on top of the injury. And so by resolving these cases, by pushing murders forward, by being the top law enforcement official and saying what should be obvious to everybody, let's try the murderers first and get them out of the way, I think we're helping people. And I totally love that. That's the best part of the job.
That was one of the pieces of legislation that was passed last session, Senate Bill 402.
Yeah, I want to thank the mayor. Well, Whitmire carried the bill. It was Senate Bill 402, and it prioritized murder trials. Our courts just weren't getting to them for whatever reason. We prioritized it, like child sexual assaults are already prioritized it. The legislature passed it nearly unanimously, Andy. You know how rare that is. And we now have a law that requires our judges to take note of murder cases on their docket, which leaves the crime lab issue to the rest of us to get fixed.
Right.
You know, another piece of legislation that, from my perspective, paid a tremendous amount of difference, and that was the bill sponsored by Joan Huffman, Senator Huffman, Senate Bill 6.
I think it really changed.
Eliminated PR bonds for
Right.
defendants charged with most violent crimes, which we were seeing coming out left and right.
And you know, too, one thing I want to bring up, I think Andy saw this a lot too. When we started doing breaking bond, people would be real critical. Well, it's the mayor's fault. It's Mayor Turner's fault. It's DA Kim Ogg's fault. You don't have anything to do with that as far as, well, you can ask the court for a high bond. You can file a motion for no bond, but ultimately it's the judge that kind of has the final say.
No kind of about it. Prosecutors have discretion about cases and what we can file, but we have zero control over bail. So we argue for the public safety based on the risk factors we know, based on somebody's criminal history, the terribleness of the crime, the facts that preceded it. We argue those things for public safety. Meanwhile, the defense, they come in and argue for the individual rights of their clients to defend themselves, and judges make the decision. And so the bill that Andy's talking about resulted in more dangerous people being held in jail on sufficient bond by judges than before.
You went to Austin and you testified on the issue quite a bit.
I did. I'm paying the political price right now by having a primary opponent, because I support public safety, period, over and out. I will always, I have always, my mother was a victim. We don't want any more victims. We want safe streets. So the fact that we had to go against some members of The same party that I'm in is neither here nor there to me. I'll never apologize for arguing for public safety. I was trying to educate them. And in fact, Democrats, some of them did vote for that bill.
That was the strangest thing I've seen, and you've been going up to legislative sessions, as well, long as I've been going up there, but I've never seen two entities within the same county that were on opposite sides testifying, one for and one testifying against it. That was a first.
Well, I don't remember who came up there and testified for the county against keeping
I do.
PR bonds out of the situation for violent felons. It's just bad public policy. I know where I was. I'm with your public safety. That's where I've always been. That's where I'll always be.
What do you want everybody to know coming up to the primary?
I want you to know that this district attorney's race really matters to your family's safety and to the success of your business based on whether your customers and employees are safe. We can't have a DA like is being proposed who would have no cash bail holds on any offender and who would release people on probation with no conditions to protect victims. You've got to have a victim-centric DA who's for enforcing the law, not just the laws that we like, and for handling people fairly. And that's what my record shows. So I want them to know that I'm running again on March the 5th for a third term. I want to make the prevention programs we put in place and all the programs for offenders sustainable and permanent. And I want us to continue to go after the violent criminals with full weight of the law so that people know Houston is a safe place to live.
You've done a lot with, I think there's a court dedicated to it, to where the issue is drugs. And the person is in the criminal justice system because of a drug addiction. You try to get those people out of the system and onto a better life.
Yes, in truth, we saw so many people, a lot of minorities sent to prison over simple possession of drugs for about a 30 or 40-year period. I really wanted to end that and move those folks into education and treatment. And a court was begun before me. We've expanded dramatically. It's called the Reintegration Court, run by Judge Brock Thomas and one of our prosecutors, Maritza Sharma. And they do a fantastic job of working with people who are addicted, who get busted. We don't want them to go to prison. We want them to get better. And in fact, many of them do. Sad thing about fentanyl, it's knocking out a lot of people. People die on that drug docket. And it just goes to show how lethal the drug trade industry has become.
Well, that's sort of changed where, I grew up in a time where people did recreational drugs. It's not like that anymore. It's not, it's not,
no,
because
it's
of fentanyl,
like,
you can't just think, well, I'll just try a little of this and have a good time on a Saturday night. It could kill you.
Yeah, it can kill you. One pill can kill. That DEA program is so real. I've met more parents who've suffered a tragedy of losing somebody really young who took one pill and they didn't know where they got it. It wasn't prescribed. They knew that they got it from a brother or a friend or bought it at school, but they of course didn't know that it had a lethal dose of fentanyl in it. And so, 14-year-old kids are waking up dead and their parents are devastated. So another new bill made that crime murder, delivery of any pill with fentanyl or any drug with fentanyl that causes death.
You have filed 2 cases,
We
right?
have.
Yeah.
We have. This is going to make drug policy relevant again. I think because we grew up with recreational drugs, nobody's been very excited about even truckloads of weed and cocaine being stopped. We seem to treat it like it's a daily occurrence. It's not. But now with small amounts of fentanyl killing kids from every different socioeconomic group across the board, I think this pursuit of people who profit from their misery at their life's expense, I think the prosecution of those individuals is going to show what our community really thinks about drug dealing, not about drug use, but about drug dealing. And I think that's going to make the job of drug enforcement officers more relevant than it's been in years.
Do you think Texas would be better off if marijuana was legalized?
Oh, I do. I'm for regulating marijuana like alcohol is regulated. But as the prosecutor of the largest jurisdiction in Texas, I don't have the ability or the authority to declare something legal or
Right.
even to decriminalize it. What we did on marijuana was work with all the police to say, hey, your guys are spending 4 hours trying to book somebody in on a possession of dope case. How about we send this person to an education program and not give them a criminal record and give your guys 4 hours back on the street? And believe it or not, maybe it's the age of all the law enforcement leaders, but everyone agreed.
Yeah.
Everyone agreed. So in Harris County, we have a very liberal policy of police not arresting you for under 4 ounces of marijuana. And then we only prosecute if people fail to go to the education class. And thousands have gone and gotten out of what would have been an arrest and a permanent record with their jobs, their cars, their family life intact. So I don't want anybody losing their way because of some charge like that. And we've tried to treat the mentally ill with compassion, same thing. And also juveniles at schools and in family fights, we're trying to work them through counseling instead of the court system.
Yeah. Well, I've said many times, most people, if you've made it to about your mid-30s and you've never been criminally charged with anything, the odds are that you're not going to end up going to jail or going to prison. It's younger people that make bad mistakes and they start going down the road.
They have lifelong consequences. Andy and I have always been not I would say pleasantly surprised that even family members of folks who were violently killed support drug treatment, juvenile diversion, mental health compassion. Now, they don't want murderers released for those reasons, but when it comes to the low end of nonviolent offenders, people who don't have repeat criminal histories, they want that. So I think we've struck a balance that's just a common sense way of running the justice system. The police are able to live with it. They've benefited in that they're focused on violent crime, and as a result, you see some of the violent crime stats going down. I think that's good news for Houston.
Yes.
One of the other bills I know you spoke on, testified on behalf, was the catalytic converter theft.
Yeah.
Enhancing penalties on
Yes. I mean, when we had a deputy killed defending his life and, property with his last breath, that's tragic enough that we needed a law to better prosecute people with unidentifiable objects, things that are not individually marked, like catalytic converters. So that's been a good law. We've seen less of it.
Yeah.
Seems like a fad that came and went, and the legislature dealt with it successfully. And then law enforcement was able to use those laws, and we're able to prosecute for it.
And that's another one of those crimes. Victims of that could theoretically see their whole lives altered because all of a sudden they don't have a vehicle, they can't get to work, they can't pay the rent. I mean,
Well, how about tourists coming here in their cars parked at a hotel, and they come out and their catalytic converter's gone and they're stuck here and they have a huge expense they didn't anticipate. I think that Andy and I talk about property crimes as really being the bread and butter of the criminal element. That's their daily job. They break into our cars, they defraud our credit cards and our credit. There's so many things that I think we can do a better job of telling the public what to avoid so they don't fall into these scams. I know I talk at a lot of senior gatherings where people are the most likely. You were at the last one, right, Randy?
I was.
Anyway, they get defrauded all the time,
Yeah.
and they just need to be told over and over. Somebody comes to your car, to your house, or they call you on the phone. Don't be rushed into a decision about spending a lot of money. It's probably a scam.
Right.
So we got to do something tonight or what?
Yep.
Even though it's your day.
Yeah, you're right. I still have to work, even though it's Randy Wallace Day. Tonight, first of all, thank you so much, Kim Hogg,
Thank you,
being
Randy
here.
Wallace. Thank you, Andy Kahn, for inviting me on.
We've been in contact with Sean Tier's people, and we're hoping that he will be with us either this coming Tuesday, or the 27th. Be sure to watch Breaking Bond tonight at 9. We take a look at a guy that He was arrested for
Now charged
tampering with a
with
corpse.
tampering with a corpse. He has 7 prior convictions. He was out on bond on an assault with a 10 to impede breathing. Then he was also charged with violating that bond and got a $100 bond.
$100 bond for violating a protective order. What kind of sense does that make? Hey, thanks again for watching, and be kind to yourself and everyone else.
Peace out.
Thanks.